Okay.
Is
So-
it time to go?
Yeah. And this is week 2. It's titled Men of War. We're mainly going to be in the Old Testament so that we can learn, because there was a lot of war going on in the Old Testament. And we learned last week that we also are in a warfare. Some key points from last week from the battle plan is we have been given authority, but we are only in charge when we take control and stand in charge. We learned that we are in a warfare, that the weapons of the Christian warfare are for the destruction of the strongholds in our life. It said it's not enough to not be conquered, but you must go and conquer. I don't want to just survive. I want to take ground. We learned that the warfare is against the devil, the flesh, the enemies, the world, and the death. And we also found places where that there's victory over all that warfare too. We are already victorious. We've seen that they had spoils and a trophy. They had invasion. They would invade. So who's doing the invading in your life? Fight God's way, because we are wearing His armor, and we also have the same sword that He used when Satan came and tempted Him. That's what we learned last week.
Sword of truth. Sword of the word.
So today we're going to look at the Old Covenant, and then next week we're going to follow up with some more on this same topic about strongholds and added anecdotes for the battle strategies. So it'll be 3 parts. So this one is Men of War. I think all of it's in the Old Covenant. And we're going to turn to Exodus chapter 6, verse 26.
Okay.
Says these are that Aaron and Moses, to whom the Lord said, bring out the children of Israel from the land of Egypt according to their armies. In chapter 7 verse 4 it says about the same thing. Pharaoh shall not hearken unto you, that I may lay my hand upon Egypt and bring forth mine armies and my people, the children of Israel, out of the land of Egypt by great judgments. So even there the Lord was making reference to we are an army. In Exodus 15:3 it says the Lord is a man of war. That's what He is. He's a man of war. And He began setting up the armies even way back here. In the New Covenant it calls Him the Lord of Sabaoth, which is the Lord of armies.
Close enough, yeah.
There are several scriptures where that God ordered war on the Amalekites or somebody like that. He would order war. He would instruct them. I found a reference in Numbers 21:14. It talks about the book of the wars of the Lord. And it mentions what 21:14. The book of the wars of the Lord, what He did in the Red Sea and the brooks of Arnon. So that book is not in our Bible, but there is a book of the wars of the Lord. He was a warrior going forth conquering.
In the book of the wars of the Lord, what He did in the Red Sea and in the books of Aaron, or the brooks of Arnon, could this possibly be the Lord's book of wars, recorded in Chronicles and Kings and Judges, the wars of Israel? He said the books of the Lord, what He did in the Red Sea, in Exodus, and these are the books of the wars right here.
Could be.
Could be. Could be.
I hadn't thought of it.
But I know it also says He has a book of remembrance.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of books that mentions that aren't in
different
here.
things that are mentioned. So He could have His own book, or In Revelation, it uses the word books, plural, shall be judged out of the books, plural, and who's ever not found in the book of life. So, this is something I thought.
Okay, so he ordered war. That was how they was going to take possession of the promised land. He gave them a promised land. He said, you're going to go there, you're going to inhabit it. How did they do that? By conquest, by war, by battle. The Old Testament had much war with other nations. And I thought today that unto us are given exceeding great and precious promises, that by these we can be partakers of his divine nature in Peter. But how do we partake of those promises? We have to stand up and take what's been given to us. It's our
Amen.
inheritance.
That is true.
Nothing worth having is cheap and easy. It's not free. Even though he done gave it, we've done inherited it, we have to rise up and possess what he gave to us. We possess the promises by warfare. The warfare in our mind, the battle that says, I'm a child of the King, I'm royalty, I'm a princess, I'm a daughter of God. So all these things that he promised me are mine. The first thing with war, I believe one of the most important topics would be the army, the formation of the army. That is a very important area. It needs detailed organization to form and to shape it because it's designed and purposed to go to war and to conquer. So the formation, the structure of the army was of vital importance. I thought about unity in the New Covenant. Paul's number one topic is you need to come together, be in the same mind, the same accord, so that you can go out and defeat the works of the enemy. An army does not stand alone, they are united. 1 Kings 9:22 actually lists us some ranks of the men of war. It was men of war, servants, princes, captains, rulers of chariots, and rulers of horsemen. So today that would probably be similar to privates, lieutenants, captains, officers, sergeants. Even back then, though, their army had a structure. Each one had a position, and they were in unity. The warriors, we're going to look at that in 1 Chronicles chapter 12. We'll be at verse 8 and verse 33 through 36. You wrote down 18. Verse 8.
1 Chronicles 8.
Chapter 12. Verse 8. And also verses 33 through 36.
Okay.
These were all mighty men that was joined up with David. In verse 8 it says, of the Gadites there separated themselves unto David into the whole of the wilderness men of might and men of war, fit for the battle, that they could handle shield and buckler, whose faces were like the faces of a lion, and were as swift as roes upon the mountains. So these were men of might, men of war. They were fit for the battle. They were prepared. They was able to handle the weapons and the armor and the shields. That they were obviously good with their feet too. They had to run. They had to attack, because it says they were as swift as roes upon the mountains. So they had the hand-to-hand combat, but they also had to be able to use their feet.
And their weapons, yeah.
Yes. Verses 33 through 36. It says, of Zebulun, such as went forth to battle, expert in war, with all instruments of war, 50,000, which could keep rank. They were not of double heart. And of Naphtali, 1,000 captains, and with them shield and spear, 7,000. Of the Danites, experts in war, 28,600. Of Asher, such as went forth to battle, expert in war. So these were not just beginners. they were experts in this field. To be an expert in something, you have to begin and then you have to pursue that career. That's how you become an expert at something.
Not just seasoned in battle and expert with their weapons, but ability to keep ranks and formal structures and.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So the reason they were experts is because God taught their hands to war. We'll find that in 2 Samuel chapter 22. Chapter 22, I'm going to read verse 30 through 40. But I'm going to start out 35. It says, He teaches my hands to war, so that a bow of steel is broken by mine arms. So that's how they became experts. God was teaching. He's training us how to be a warrior, how to take ground. But we'll start at verse 30. It says, For by thee I have run through a troop. By my God have I leaped over a wall. As for God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord is tried. He is a buckler to all them that trust in him. For who is God save the Lord, and who is a rock save our God? God is my strength and power, and he maketh my way perfect. He makes my feet like hinds' feet, setteth me upon the high places. He teaches my hands to war, so that a bow of steel is broken by mine arms. Thou hast also given me the shield of thy salvation, and thy gentleness hath made me great. Thou hast enlarged my steps under me, so that my feet did not slip. I have pursued mine enemies and destroyed them, and turned not again until I had consumed them. And I have consumed them and wounded them, that they could not arise. Yea, they are fallen under my feet. For thou hast girded me with strength to battle. Them that rose up against me hast thou subdued under me. Thou hast also given me the necks of mine enemies, that I might destroy them that hate me. So God is the one that's teaching his hands to war. God is the one that makes his way, that goes before him and prepares the way. God is the one that gives him the strength and strength to battle, salvation, a sword, a shield of salvation in verse 36. We are prepared, equipped, and trained by God. All we got to do is go out there and be the vessel, do what he says to do.
Amen. That's true. That is true.
For warriors, I also wrote down Leviticus chapter 26, verse 7 and 13. Know what that is? Leviticus 26. He was instructing them here and giving them promises of what he would do for them. And in verse 7, it says, You shall chase your enemies. They shall fall before you by the sword. 5 of you shall chase 100, and 100 of you put 10,000 to fly. And your enemies shall fall before you by the sword. We learned last week, Jeremiah 12:12 says, The sword of the Lord, it shall devour. And then in verse 13 it says, I am the Lord your God, which brought you forth out of the land of Egypt, that you should not be their bondmen. And I have broken the bands of your yoke, and made you go upright. So we're not to be in bondage. Not in our head, not in our mind. We're not to be in bondage. We've been set free, and now we invade, and we conquer our enemies. They fall by the sword of the Lord.
Which is his word, and when he says it is done.
Yes. Okay, so far the Lord, he's a man of war. Formation of the army, what it consists of was the warriors that were trained and skilled. Then they had times of war. We learned that from 2 Samuel 11:1, that there was a time of war back then. They would send out spies. They would investigate before they would just set up a plan. They would investigate first. Spies were sent in Numbers, Joshua, 1 Samuel. Then they would set up an ambush was one example. We'll look at Joshua 8 verses 2 and 12. Verse 2, it says, Thou shalt do to Ai and her king as thou did unto Jericho and her king. Only the spoil thereof and the cattle thereof shall you take for a prey unto yourselves. Lay thee an ambush for the city behind it. In verse 12, he took about 5,000 men and set them to lie in ambush between Bethel and Ai on the west side of the city. So after they would spy out the land and see what they was up against, they would set ambushments. They would attack by surprise. That was one strategy. Gideon, he took an army of 300. That was his strategy. He put the jars and broke them on the ground. I guess that was a surprise attack. There was also circumvention, which is to bypass or to cleverly avoid by going a different way. So instead of getting a head-on conflict with your enemy, you could bypass, go around cleverly behind them, sneak up a different way. That's found in 2 Samuel 5 and 23. I believe they would also, considering there was an army, they would need a headquarters or a base of operations. That is Deuteronomy 20:20. Today that would be similar to church, Bible study. You go there and you learn what you're armed with. You learn the power that you have. And then you go out and take possession.
Yeah, amen. That's cool, yeah.
20:20. Only the trees which thou knowest that they be not trees for meat, thou shalt destroy and cut them down, and thou shalt build bulwarks against the city that maketh war with thee until it be subdued. So their bulwark, that was a place to hem in. It was fenced fortress, a stronghold. It would be for safety and to separate. It would be where you got instructions, where you got some organization going on. There were heavy armed spearmen, slingers, and archers. All these things had to be, when are you going to send out the spearmen? When are you going to send out the slingers? The catapults that were prepared to hurl large stones were there. Mounds would go against the city wall because the walls protected the city back then. And they would build mounds about halfway up the city wall so that slingers and archers could get up there and then shoot over the wall. That was one of their tactics. I also found out the crow. I have not heard of that till now, but a crow was a long spar with an iron claw at one end and ropes at the other end to pull down stones or men from the wall.
We call it a crowbar today.
Yeah.
Still use that crowbar, don't we?
I liked what it said in 2 Chronicles 26, verses 12 through 15.
26:12.
Mm-hmm. The whole number of the chief of the fathers of the mighty men of valor were 2,600. Under their hand was an army, 300,000 and 7,500 that made war with mighty power to help the king against the enemy. And Uzziah prepared for them throughout all the host shields and spears, helmets, habergeons, bows, and slings to cast stones. And he made in Jerusalem engines invented by cunning men to be on the towers and upon the bulwarks to shoot out arrows and great stones withal. So these were coming up. They made war with mighty power. And there was things being invented, engines being made. Everything was being prepared, helmets and bows and slings.
Catapults to sling stone. Big stone.
War was also sometimes a judgment. I found that in Jeremiah and Zephaniah, a couple of scriptures. War was a judgment from God. There was also consequences of war. Anytime you have war, there's for the one being conquered, you're going to have desolation and destruction, famine. Let's look at Lamentations chapter 5. It's after Jeremiah. Chapter 5, verse 10. It says, their skin was black like an oven because of the terrible famine. They ravished the women in Zion and the maids in the cities of Judah. Princes are hanged up by their hand. The faces of the elders were not honored. They took the young men to grind, and the children fell under the wood. The elders have ceased from their gate, the young men from their music. The joy of our heart is seized, our dances turned into mourning. This was after some terrible times when Jeremiah was actually praying for restoration during this time. But some of the result was famine, that cruelty. They ravished the women. It also mentions devastation in Isaiah, pestilence in Jeremiah. So there's consequences to war. It doesn't just affect the one person that you're going to battle with. It affects the entire army, which affects the entire kingdom there. So when we go to war against our enemy, it's not just affecting my walk with God. It's not just affecting my freedom. It's affecting the enemy's kingdom and God's kingdom, because we're all in it together.
Yeah, it does. Amen. I agree.
The next thing would be the victory. Deuteronomy 20, verses 1 through 4.
Okay.
When thou goest out to battle against thine enemies, and seest horses and chariots, and a people more than thou, be not afraid of them. For the Lord thy God is with thee, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And it shall be, when you are come nigh unto the battle, that the priest shall approach and speak unto the people. And he shall say to them, Hear, O Israel, ye approach this day unto battle against your enemies. Let not your hearts faint, fear not, do not tremble, neither be ye terrified because of them. For the Lord your God is he that goeth with you, to fight for you against your enemies, and to save you. So it's the Lord that gives the victory. We are, because of his victory, we just follow in that victory. He gave us the victory by what he'd done. He fought for us against our enemies. He conquered our enemy. All we do is just follow in that trail. The bodies of the dead for the enemy, they were plundered. Some survivors were mutilated. Some were killed in a savage way. Judges 1 and 6. But Adonai-Bezek fled. They pursued after him and caught him, cut off his thumbs and his great toes. So they mutilated the survivors. They would pursue them, either bring them into captivity or mutilate them. And that's what Jesus done when he conquered our enemy. He made a parade. He cut off his big toes and big thumbs, so to speak. If you don't have your toes and your thumbs, you don't have good balance, and you can't grab anything, so you can no longer do battle. You might have a mouth that can speak great things.
And made a show of him openly.
Yeah. And he can no longer do battle. He's been conquered.
That is true.
Let's see. 1 Samuel 11:2 mentions to pluck out the eyes. That's mutilation. and killed in a savage way. 2 Samuel 12:31.
Second Samuel what?
12:31. He brought forth the people that were therein and put them under saws, under harrows of iron, and under axes of iron, made them pass through the brick kiln. Thus did he unto all the cities of the children of Ammon. So David and all the people returned to Jerusalem. 2 Chronicles 25:12. The other 10,000 left alive did the children of Judah carry away captive, and brought them unto the top of the rock, and cast them down from the top of the rock. And they were all broken in pieces. They had no mercy on their enemy. And that's what we're supposed to do when the enemy attacks our mind, our thoughts. We are to have no mercy on him.
We recognize who our enemy is. It's not flesh and blood.
Right.
Spiritual wickedness in high places.
Yep. And the last thing I got on men of war is the church and the Antichrist. Because the church, we are all men and women of war. And we are in a warfare. All these scriptures are in Revelation. I'll just read through them. Revelation 11:7. When they shall finish their testimony, the beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them, and shall kill them. There you see the warfare between the church and the Antichrist. In 12:17, the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So the dragon's out there to make war with us.
That's our warfare. That's our enemy. That's who we fight. And yeah, like you said, show him no mercy. Jesus didn't show him no mercy. We shouldn't either.
Right. 17 and 14. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. And then chapter 19, verses 14 and 19. 19:14. The armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And verse 19. I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. So those are just spiritual references showing that we are men and women of war. We are in a warfare.
And the war is going to continue until the new heaven and the new earth.
Yeah, we're already more than conquerors. We're already victorious. But until we know that, we're going to be trying to fight a battle we've already won. Once you know that, you can stand up and say, I am the victor. Mm-hmm. I am triumphant. And then you can go and you can invade.
So at the second coming, we got wars and rumors of wars. We fight this battle against Satan and all evil. Spiritual warfare. To the second coming of Christ, we go into 1,000-year millennial reign where Satan's bound. But then when he's loosed, it says after 1,000 years he's loosed. And here's another battle.
Yes.
It says nations are in the four corners of the earth, and they gather them together to battle again. Until the new heaven and the new earth is set up, we will continue to be in a warfare.
Yep. But then there will be, war will cease.
Yeah.
Psalms 46:9 and Isaiah 2:4 mentions that.
Yeah.
There will be a day of peace.
And they'll learn war no more. The lion will play with the adder, or the child will play on the adder's snake holes or whatever. Lions will eat straw. Yeah, it'll all be a new heaven and a new earth, just the same as it was before the fall of Adam. Be a glorious day.
So that was just some historical information though about how they fought back then. Next week we're going to try to find out how we fight today, our battle strategy, the strongholds, the anecdotes, stuff like that. We'll talk a lot about principalities and powers. We're going to try to bring it
Okay.
into the new covenant next week. So this was just some history
Yeah.
information.
Don't want to get too far into the, okay.
You can turn it off.